That woman is an unfit mother, and we have the paperwork to prove it. My own mother said it. She said it to my son's second-grade teacher in the school hallway while the spring concert was still echoing through the open gym doors. She smiled when she said it. She was holding a folder against her chest like a shield, and she tilted it toward the teacher so the words on the tab were easy to read. Petition, custody, my name typed underneath. I was standing 6 feet away with my son's coat over my arm. He had just sung in front of 200 people. He found my face in the crowd during the second song, and he had not stopped grinning since. Now, my mother was telling a teacher he trusted that I was dangerous, that I was the problem, that she was going to take him. My sister stood beside her, handing out little folded cards, her phone number. New emergency contact, she was telling another parent, in case anything happens. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't grab the folder. I crouched down, zipped my son's coat, and told him he was wonderful. Friday, there's a hearing. They think they already know how it ends. I'm Hazel Markham, 34, and the folder my mother kept waving around is not the only folder in that courthouse. Mine is the one nobody in my family knows I have. Let me take you back to that night. The gym smelled like floor wax and orange slices, folding chairs in crooked rows. A paper banner that said Spring Showcase with the second S peeling off the cinder block wall. My son's name is Theo. He is 7. He was the smallest kid in the third row of risers, in a button-up shirt I had ironed twice because the first time I scorched the collar and had to start over with a wet towel. He kept tugging the cuffs down over his wrists. He gets that from me. I had gotten there 40 minutes early to get an aisle seat where he could see me. I work as a legal document specialist at a family law firm downtown, which is a fancy way of saying I spend my days organizing other people's worst moments into binders. I know how a courtroom works from the inside. I knew, sitting in that gym, that something was wrong the second my parents walked in. They never came to Theo's things, not his kindergarten graduation, not a single soccer game. My mother once told me children's events were performative, but there they were, my mother Glenda and my father Walter, in their church clothes, scanning the crowd, and behind them, my sister Brooke, in heels she did not need for a school gym, carrying a tote bag. They did not sit near me. They sat in the front row, on the far side, where the teachers and the principal had their reserved chairs. Glenda leaned over and started talking to the principal before the lights even dimmed. I watched her hand move to the woman's forearm. I watched the principal nod, then glance back over her shoulder. At me. I told myself I was being paranoid. Theo found my face during the second song. He grinned so hard he missed a line and didn't care. For 3 minutes and 40 seconds, I forgot all of it. Then the lights came up, and my mother stood, and she walked straight toward Theo's teacher with that folder pressed to her chest. And I realized the front row hadn't been a coincidence. That folder was the first thing I heard about before I ever saw it. 3 weeks earlier, my brother had called me from a number I didn't recognize. My older brother is named Daniel. He left home at 19 and learned what I'm only now learning. He doesn't speak to our parents. He almost never speaks to me because I'm the one who stayed, and staying made me suspect. But 3 weeks before the concert, he called. "They're putting something together," he said. "Mom called me. She wanted to know if I'd sign something. About you." "Sign what?" "A statement. That you're unstable. That Theo isn't safe." He paused. I told her no. Then I hung up. But Hazel, I know that voice. She's not bluffing. She's already started. I stood in my kitchen with the phone against my ear and the dishwasher running, and I felt the floor tilt. "Why?" I said. "Why now?" "You really don't know?" Daniel said. And then, quieter, "Ask yourself what changed in the last year. Ask yourself what you have now that you didn't have before." He wouldn't say more. He said he'd already said too much, and he hung up. I stood there until the dishwasher clicked off and the kitchen went silent. Before I go any further, if this is already sitting heavy in your chest, take a second to like and subscribe. It genuinely helps these stories reach the people who need them. And drop your city and the time it is where you are in the comments. I love seeing how far this travels. Now let me get back to what changed. What changed was that Theo's father left, and I didn't fall apart. I should tell you what our family looked like from the inside, because from the outside it looked normal. Better than normal. My parents have been married 38 years. They go to the same church they've gone to my whole life. My father retired from the county road department with a pension and a plaque. My mother runs the church rummage sale and brings casseroles to funerals. People in town call them lovely. People in town do not eat Sunday dinner at their table. At that table, there was always a ledger. My mother kept it in her head, and she read from it the way some people read scripture, who had disappointed her, who owed her, who had forgotten what she'd done for them. Daniel was at the top of that ledger for years, the son who left, until I gave her a fresher entry by getting divorced. After Cole moved out, I became the chapter she read aloud. "Some women just aren't built for marriage," she said once, ladling gravy while Theo pushed peas around his plate. "Your grandmother used to say a broken home breaks the child next." I used to absorb those lines without flinching, the way you stop hearing a clock. That night, I caught Theo watching me to see if I'd react. He was 5. Even at 5, he was learning to read the room my mother built. That was the first time I understood I had to get him out of the current, not just survive it myself. Theo's father is a man named Cole, and he is not a villain in this story, just a coward. He moved out when Theo was 5 and moved 3 states away within the year. He sends a card on Theo's birthday with $20 in it. He has not asked to visit in 2 years. For a while, I waited for him to come back, the way you wait for weather to change. My mother had a prediction about that. She said it at a Sunday dinner with Theo at the table coloring. She said, "A boy needs a real family, not whatever this is." She gestured at me, at our small apartment, at the macaroni I'd made. "When you fall apart, Hazel, and you will, we'll be here to do what's right for him." I didn't fall apart. I got a better job. I moved us into a 2-bedroom with a window that got morning light. I got Theo into therapy after the divorce, the good kind, a play therapist who helped him stop crying at drop-off. I made the parent-teacher conferences. I packed the lunches with the notes inside. I did the boring, unglamorous, invisible work of being the only adult, and I did it well. Every morning, I wrote a note and put it in his lunchbox. Small ones. "You're brave. I'll be at the window when you get home. Proud of you." It was a tiny thing, the kind of thing nobody gives you an award for. My mother would have called it performative. But I'd grown up in a house where love came with a ledger, and I'd decided my son would grow up knowing love came free and showed up daily, written by hand, no strings. Those notes are the whole difference between the house I came from and the house I built. And somewhere in there, my doing well became the thing they couldn't forgive. Because if I was fine, then all the years they spent telling me I was the broken one were a lie. My whole life, I had been the family's cautionary tale, the sensitive one, the one who couldn't handle things. Brooke was the success. I was the warning. My competence wasn't a relief to them. It was an accusation. I should explain Brooke because you'll need to understand her to understand Friday. Brooke is 2 years older than me and has spent 2 years longer being the favorite. She is a real estate agent with a brand, a logo, a slogan on the side of bus benches. She has a husband who agrees with everything she says and no children, which my mother frames as a tragedy and Brooke frames as a choice. And the truth is somewhere neither of them will look. Brooke wanted Theo, not in a warm, auntie way. She wanted him the way she wants a listing in a good school district. He was the family's only grandchild, and a grandchild is currency in my mother's world. Whoever controlled Theo controlled the story. And Brooke, who had built her entire identity on being the one who does things right, had decided that I was doing the most important thing wrong. She started small, a comment that I let him have too much screen time. A concern that he seemed anxious. Anxious the week after his father left him. She would call me at work in the middle of the day to tell me Theo had seemed sad on a video call she'd insisted on, and didn't I think that was something a professional should look at? She offered to pay for that professional. She offered to take him for a few weeks so you can get yourself sorted. Every offer was wrapped in love and lined with a hook. I said no, gently, every time, and every no went into the ledger as proof I was unreasonable. Then she started showing up at his school for pickup without telling me, signing him out early once, claiming she'd had permission she did not have. I found out because the front office called me confused. I didn't make a scene. I called the school, removed everyone from the pickup list except me and Daniel, and documented the incident in writing the way I'd document anything at work. Date, time, what happened, who I called. I emailed it to the school so there was a record. That email is the first page of the folder they don't know I have. I want to be clear about something because it matters. I am not a woman who secretly recorded her family. I never hid a camera. I never kept a sneaky little notebook of their sins. Everything I have is official. School records I'm legally entitled to as his parent. Medical records. Emails I sent and received. The unsigned, dropped custody petition my mother filed and abandoned 4 years ago, which is a public court record anyone can pull. Court filings. The paper trail of a system gathered through the front door in daylight. I know how the front door works. That is the whole point. The night of the concert, after I zipped Theo's coat and told him he was wonderful, my mother intercepted us at the gym doors. "Hazel," she said, in the warm voice she uses in public, "we need to talk about Theo's future." Behind her, the teacher I'd seen her cornering, Theo's teacher, Miss Pruitt, was watching us with an expression I'll never forget. Not hostility, worry. Glenda had spent the concert pouring poison into that woman's ear, and now Miss Pruitt was looking at me like she wasn't sure if Theo was safe in my car. "His future is fine," I said. My father stepped up beside my mother. Walter doesn't talk much. He delivers verdicts. "It's not fine, Hazel. A boy needs stability. You can barely keep yourself together. I had a job, an apartment, a child in a clean ironed shirt who'd just performed in a concert. But in my father's mouth, none of it counted. We've consulted an attorney," my mother said, and she tapped the folder. "We're petitioning for guardianship, for Theo's sake. We didn't want to do it like this, but you've left us no choice." That was the first time the daisy cutter dropped. The line I'd hear again and again in different mouths, getting heavier each time. "You've left us no choice," my mother said. As if I were a weather event, as if I were the one doing something to them. Brooke appeared at my elbow then, smelling like the perfume she's worn since high school. She crouched down to Theo's level, the way you crouch for a photo. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. "You know you can always come stay with Auntie Brooke, right? You have a room at my house." A real room. Theo looked up at me. He's 7. He could feel the temperature in that hallway. He reached up and took my hand. "Theo and I are going home," I said. "Good night." I walked us to the car. I buckled him in. I drove out of the lot at exactly the speed limit, both hands on the wheel, while my son talked about his solo. I didn't cry until he was asleep that night, and even then I did it in the bathroom with the fan on so he wouldn't hear. Then I dried my face and I opened my laptop. I want to tell you what I found. But first, I need you to understand what I already knew, because it's the thing my family forgot. They forgot where I work. They forgot what I do all day. I do not just file papers. I read them. I read custody evaluations and guardianship petitions and the affidavits people file when they want to take a child away from a parent. I have read hundreds of them. I know what a judge looks for, and I know. This is the part that matters. What a judge throws out. A grandparent in my state cannot simply decide a fit parent is unfit and take her child. The law has a name for the standard, and the standard is high, and it exists precisely to stop what my mother was trying to do. To win, my parents would have to prove I was unfit. Documented neglect, abuse, abandonment, a pattern. They had none of that. They had a folder full of opinions. What they didn't know was that I had a folder full of facts, and one fact in particular that would matter more than all the others, sitting in the public record under my own mother's signature. Let me show you how I started building it. The morning after the concert, I called the firm and used a personal day. Then I called the one person in my family who'd warned me. Daniel didn't pick up the first time. He texted back, "What?" "They did it," I typed. "At the concert. Said it to his teacher. Brooke handed out her number as his emergency contact." The 3 dots appeared and disappeared 3 times. Then, "I'm coming over." My brother had not been to my home in 4 years. When he showed up that afternoon, he looked older than I remembered, and he stood in my doorway like he wasn't sure he was allowed inside. Theo was at school. I made coffee. We sat at my kitchen table, and for the first time in our adult lives, Daniel and I told each other the truth. "You want to know why they're really doing this?" he said. "It's not about Theo's safety. It's about her record." "Whose record?" "Mom's." Daniel turned his coffee cup in a slow circle. "You think you were the cautionary tale? You weren't. I was first." He looked at the table. When I was 16, she tried to have me committed. Did you know that? Told a doctor I was a danger to myself. I wasn't. I was a teenager who wanted to leave. She wanted control, and when she couldn't get it, she tried to put a label on me so nobody would believe me. I didn't know. I was 14. They'd told me he'd gone to stay with an aunt. It didn't work, Daniel said. The doctor saw through it. But there's a paper trail. There's always a paper trail with her. She files things. She starts processes and abandons them when they stop being useful. She did it to me. And he stopped. And what? She did it to you, he said. 4 years ago, after Cole left. I went cold. What are you talking about? You really don't remember? The summer after the divorce, when you were drowning. She filed a guardianship petition then. For Theo. She had the paperwork drawn up, claimed you were a danger to yourself, that Theo wasn't safe. Then Cole's lawyer made noise about the custody split and it got complicated and she dropped it. She withdrew it before it ever got in front of a judge. She told everyone she'd decided to give you another chance. The kitchen tilted again, the way it had the night he first called. I remembered that summer. I remembered being so exhausted I slept in my work clothes. I remembered my mother saying she was looking into options for Theo. I'd been too far underwater to understand what that meant. She had filed once before, and then she had abandoned it. And a filed petition, even a withdrawn one, does not disappear. It sits in the county clerk's office, in the public record, forever. Daniel, I said slowly, are you telling me there's an existing court filing from 4 years ago where Mom petitioned to take Theo and then dropped it? Yes. And she's about to walk into a courtroom this Friday and tell a judge she's never done anything but act in Theo's best interest? For the first time that day, my brother almost smiled. Pause for a second, because I want to know what you'd do here. You've just learned the person attacking you has done this exact thing before, and left a record. Do you go nuclear right away, or do you hold it? Tell me below before I show you what I chose. I chose to hold it. Here's the thing about working where I work. I have watched people lose winnable cases because they got loud too early. They tip their hand. They give the other side time to build a story around the bad fact, to explain it away, to file a counter-narrative. The most powerful thing in a courtroom is a fact the other side doesn't know you have. So, I did the boring, methodical thing. The next morning, I went to the county clerk's office on my lunch break and I pulled the record myself. It was real. Case number, filing date, my mother's signature, my father's name listed as co-petitioner, a guardianship petition naming Theo, alleging I was an unfit and unstable parent, the exact words, 4 years before she said them to his teacher. And then, 6 weeks later, a voluntary withdrawal, dismissed without prejudice at petitioner's request. I had it printed and certified. Certified because at work I've watched judges wave off a regular printout and lean forward when the clerk's raised seal catches the light. A certified copy is the record speaking for itself. I paid the fee. I put it in a plain manila folder. Then I started pulling everything else, the legitimate way, through the front door. I requested Theo's complete school file, which I am entitled to as his parent. Attendance, near perfect. Teacher notes, well-adjusted, happy, secure. The school counselor's note after the divorce, documenting that I had proactively brought Theo in, that I had communicated with the school, that I had handled it, in the counselor's words. Exactly right. I requested Theo's medical records, every well-child visit on schedule, every vaccine. The therapist's discharge summary noting Theo had made excellent progress in a stable, supportive home environment. I gathered the email where the front office flagged Brooke signing him out without authorization, the email where I removed everyone but me and Daniel from the pickup list, my own contemporaneous note from that day, sent to myself, time-stamped. I was not building a weapon to humiliate anyone. I was building the truth in the only language a courtroom respects. My mother had a folder of opinions. I had a folder of records. And at the very front of it, the certified copy of the petition she'd filed and quit. But a single withdrawn petition on its own can be explained away. A good lawyer could call it a frightened grandmother who'd had a change of heart. I knew that wasn't enough. I needed it to be a pattern, and a pattern needs more than one point. So that night, I called Daniel again and asked him the hardest question I'd ever asked my brother. "You said she tried to have you committed when you were 16. I pressed the phone tighter. "Is there a record of that too?" The line was quiet for a long time. "Why?" "Because if she did it to you, and she did it to me 4 years ago, and she's doing it again now, that's not a worried grandmother. That's how she operates. And a judge needs to see the operation, not one bad day." "You want me to dig up the worst year of my life?" Daniel said. "I don't want you to do anything," I said. "I'm telling you what I need. You get to decide whether you can give it." He hung up without answering. I figured that was that. My brother had built a whole life out of never looking back, and I'd just asked him to. He called back at 6 the next morning. "There's a hospital intake form," he said. His voice was flat, the way you go flat to get through something. "From when I was 16. Mom drove me to the emergency room and told them I was talking about hurting myself. I wasn't. I'd told her I was moving out at 18 and she lost it. The intake nurse evaluated me, found nothing, and discharged me in 4 hours with a note. I requested my own medical records years ago for insurance. I still have them. The note's in there. It says, and I memorized this when I was 19 because it saved me. No evidence of risk. Patient presence as a normal adolescent in a high-conflict home. Recommend family services. I had to sit down. "High-conflict home," I said. "A nurse wrote that in 1999. "She did, and nobody ever did anything about it because Mom's the one who tells the story, and Mom always tells it first." Daniel exhaled. "You can have it, the form. I'll bring it Sunday. But Hazel, I need you to understand what it cost me to keep that. I kept it to prove to myself I wasn't crazy, not to use as a weapon. I'm not going to make you testify," I said. "I'm not going to put your name in front of her if you don't want it there. But if you'll let me hand the judge a 25-year-old nurse's note that says the same thing the counselor's note about Theo says now, that the child is fine and the home is the problem, then this stops being my word against hers. It becomes a pattern with a date stamp." "Do it," he said. "I'm done protecting her." That was the moment my brother stopped being a cautionary tale and started being my ally. And I understood his stake was bigger than mine. For him, this wasn't just about Theo. It was about finally being believed about the thing that had run him out of his own family at 19. There was one more thread I had to pull, and it scared me more than the clerk's office. Cousin Renee, the one who'd spotted me at the records building and run straight to Brooke. Renee is my mother's sister's daughter, a clerk in the recording office, and she'd spent her whole life as my mother's eyes and ears in the family, rewarded with approval the way I never was. If Renee was watching me, my mother knew everything I pulled the second I pulled it. I almost let it go. Then I realized something sitting at my kitchen table at midnight. Renee didn't just watch me. Renee processed filings. Renee had been working in that office for 9 years, which meant 4 years ago when my mother filed and withdrew that petition against me, there was a real chance Renee had been the clerk who stamped it. I didn't ask Renee for anything. I would never put a relative in that position, and I didn't need to. The record spoke for itself, certified, sealed, but it told me something. My mother had filed against me once, in the same building where her own niece worked, and made it quietly disappear and made sure I was too underwater to notice. She didn't just attack people, she managed the evidence. She always had. I started thinking like the version of her I'd just discovered. If I were Glenda and I knew Hazel was pulling records, what would I do? I wouldn't wait for Friday. I'd move first. I'd try to create a fact that didn't exist yet. 2 days later, she did exactly that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I told no one but Daniel, not the firm, not Ms. Pruitt, though I wanted to, especially not my mother. I thought I had time. I thought I had until Friday to prepare quietly. I was wrong because my mother did something I didn't expect. She moved up the timeline. 2 days before the hearing, I got a call from Theo's school. The principal, Ms. Albright, wanted to meet with me, today, if possible, about concerns that had been raised. I knew exactly whose concerns. I went after work. The office was the same office where they hand out attendance awards, but it felt like an interrogation room. Ms. Albright sat behind her desk with a legal pad, and in the chair beside her, uninvited and unannounced, sat my mother. "Hazel," Ms. Albright said. "Thank you for coming. Your mother reached out with some serious concerns about Theo's home situation, and given our duty to the child, I felt we needed to talk." My mother folded her hands in her lap and looked at me with wet, performed eyes. "I didn't want to do this here," she said softly. "But I'm so worried about him. I had to say something to someone who could protect him. This was a trap, and it was a good one. She wasn't just trying to win in court. She was trying to manufacture evidence outside of it. If she could get the school to formally document a concern to put it in writing, that would become a real record. And a real record from a school carries weight a grandmother's opinion never could. She was trying to build her own paper trail, the same way she'd tried with Daniel, the same way she'd tried with me before. I understood, sitting in that plastic chair, exactly how dangerous she was. Not loud, not obvious, patient. She had spent her whole life learning how to make institutions do her cruelty for her. So I didn't argue with her. I turned to the principal. "Ms. Albright," I said, "has Theo ever come to school hurt, hungry, dirty, unprepared?" "No," she said carefully. "Never. He's one of our—" "Has he missed school? Been late, repeatedly? Shown up without his homework, his lunch, his permission slips?" "No, his attendance is excellent." "Has any teacher, counselor, or staff member ever filed a concern about his well-being at home in 2 years?" A pause. "No, not until—" She glanced at my mother. "Not until this week." "And this week's concern," I said, "comes from a grandmother who has not attended a single one of his school events in 2 years, and who is the petitioner in a guardianship case against me being heard the day after tomorrow." Ms. Albright's pen stopped moving. My mother's face did something then. The wet eyes went flat for just a second, and underneath I saw the thing that's always there. Not worry. Calculation. "I came here," I said, "because you called, and because Theo's school deserves my respect. But I think you can see what's actually happening. I'd ask that anything documented from this meeting reflect all of it, including the timing." Ms. Albright looked at her legal pad. Then she set down her pen. "I think," she said slowly, "I have what I need. Mrs. Markham, thank you for your concern, but I don't have anything here that rises to a report. Theo is a happy, healthy child." My mother stood up so fast her chair scraped. "You'll regret not listening," she said. The warm voice was gone. "All of you will." She walked out, and Ms. Albright looked at me, and quietly, off the record, she said, "Friday, the hearing. Is there anything you need from us?" I almost cried right there. "Just the truth," I said. "Just exactly what you told me." "I can do that," she said. And she wrote something down, and I knew without asking that it was the truth, dated, in her own hand. Walking to my car, I let myself feel one clean minute of relief. It didn't last because my mother was waiting in the parking lot. She was standing beside my car in the cold with her purse held in both hands. For 1 second, I saw an old woman alone in a school lot at dusk, and something in me softened, and then she opened her mouth and the softness died. "You humiliated me in there," she said. "I asked the principal 3 questions," I said. "The answers humiliated you." "You've always thought you were so clever." She stepped closer. "Let me tell you how Friday is going to go. I have known that judge's husband for 20 years. We sit on the hospital auxiliary together. I have references from our pastor, from our doctor, from people who matter in this town. And what do you have? You have a folder and a chip on your shoulder. You're a divorced woman who can't keep a husband, raising a boy alone in an apartment. No judge in this county is going to take my grandson away from a stable home and leave him with that." There it was, the whole world view, in one breath. To my mother, a stable home was a married couple in a paid-off house who knew the right people. The fact that I had never once failed Theo, in any way that left a mark on any record, did not enter into it. She measured safety and respectability. She always had. It was the same yardstick she'd used to make me feel worthless my whole life, and she genuinely could not imagine a courtroom measuring any other way. "You might be right," I said. And I meant it because I was still afraid of exactly that. Maybe a judge looks at you and sees the church and the casseroles and the pastor's reference. Maybe a judge looks at me and sees what you've spent 34 years telling everyone I am. Her chin lifted. She thought she'd won. But here's the thing, I said. A judge doesn't get to rule on what you say about me, or what I say about you. A judge rules on the record, and the record, Mom, is just facts on paper. It doesn't care who you sit with on the auxiliary. For just a second, the certainty in her face flickered. She didn't know what I had. She only knew I had something and that I wasn't afraid the way she'd expected me to be. That scared her more than any threat I could have made. "What did you pull at that office?" she said, quiet now. "Renee said you were there for an hour." I unlocked my car. "I'm Theo's mother," I said. "I'm allowed to know what's in his file." I drove away with her still standing there, and in my mirror I watched her get smaller, and I felt the dangerous thing under all of it. She would not let this go now. I had let her see I wasn't drowning, and a drowning daughter was the only daughter she knew how to have. That night my sister called, and Brooke had figured out part of what I was doing. "You went to the clerk's office," Brooke said. No hello. "Cousin Renee saw you. She works in the records building. What were you pulling, Hazel?" I kept my voice even. "I'm Theo's parent. I'm allowed to pull his records." "Don't play dumb. You're up to something. You always do this. You play the victim and then you stab everyone in the back." She was working herself up. "Mom is trying to help that boy and you're treating her like a criminal after everything she's done for you." "What has she done for me, Brooke?" A silence. Brooke is not used to questions. "She raised you," she said finally. "She put a roof over your head, and this is how you repay her, dragging the family name through court." There it was again in her mouth now, heavier. "I haven't dragged anyone anywhere," I said. "She filed against me Friday." "Because she has to. You've left her no choice." The daisy cutter third time, from the third mouth. And that's when I understood that they had told this story to each other so many times that they believed it. In their version, they were the rescuers. I was the danger. The petition was an act of love. They had built a reality where taking my son was the kind thing to do, and they could not see out of it. Sympathy explains people. It doesn't excuse them. I felt one cold drop of pity for my sister, who had been the favorite so long she'd never had to ask whether the family was right about anything. And then I let it go, because she was still trying to take my child. "Brooke," I said, "why do you want him, really?" The question landed somewhere. I heard her breath change. "Because you don't deserve him," she said, and her voice cracked, and for 1 second she was honest. "You got the kid. You got the thing that matters, and you can't even—" She stopped. "Mom always said you'd ruin everything good you got. I'm not going to watch you ruin him." Then she hung up. I sat with my phone in my hand, so that was it. Not Theo's safety. Brooke's lifelong ledger, where everything good was supposed to go to her, and the only thing left to take was my son. And my mother. My mother, who needed me to be unfit so that her whole life made sense. Who had filed against her own children whenever they tried to stop needing her. 3 people, 3 motives, 1 folder. I had 1 day, because the hearing had been moved up, and the next morning my mother made the move I should have seen coming. I was at work when my supervisor called me into her office. She had an odd look on her face. There was a letter on her desk, on letterhead from my mother's lawyer, addressed to the firm. It respectfully brought to the firm's attention that an employee, named, was using her position and professional knowledge to pursue a personal vendetta against her elderly parents, and asked whether the firm was comfortable with this conduct. It was a lie wearing a suit. I had used nothing but my rights as a parent. But it didn't need to be true. It only needed to scare my employer. "I'm not going to pretend I understand your family situation," my supervisor said. "But you understand how this looks. We do family law. We can't have a whiff of a paralegal weaponizing the system." "I requested my son's school and medical records," I said. "Any parent can do that." I pulled 1 public court document at the clerk's window on my lunch, like any member of the public can. I haven't touched a firm file or a firm resource. I'd stake my job on it. "You may be staking your job on it," she said, not unkindly. "Take the rest of the week, paid. Let's let this settle and talk after the hearing." I drove home shaking. This was the counterattack, and it was clever because it didn't have to win. My mother knew she probably couldn't beat the records, so she went after the things around me instead. my job, my reputation, the ground under my feet. If she could make me look like a vindictive woman abusing her position, she could poison the whole frame before the judge ever saw a single page. By that afternoon, it had spread. An aunt I hadn't heard from in years left a voicemail saying she was praying for the family during this difficult time you've created. 2 of my mother's friends unfriended me online in a way I was clearly meant to notice. Brooke posted a vague, tearful thing about protecting the innocent that 40 people my mother knew had liked. And then she went too far in a way that, for the first time, frightened me as a mother instead of as a defendant. The after-school program director called me at 4. My mother had shown up at pickup. She'd told the staff she was Theo's grandmother and emergency contact and that there'd been a family situation, and she needed to take him. The card Brooke had handed out at the concert, Brooke's number listed as the new emergency contact, was in my mother's hand as proof. It didn't work. I'd already stripped everyone but me and Daniel off the authorized list weeks ago after the first pickup incident, and the director, God bless her, followed the list and not the story. She kept Theo inside, called me, and refused to release him to anyone. By the time my mother left, she'd made a scene in front of a dozen parents, and the director had written it all up. I drove to that program faster than I'd like to admit. Theo was at a little table doing a worksheet, completely fine, more interested in his snack than in the fact that his grandmother had just tried to walk out of the building with him. I knelt and held him for a second too long, and he wriggled away to finish his worksheet. But sitting in the car after, my hands wouldn't stop shaking, because that was the day I understood she wasn't going to wait for a judge. She'd decided the courthouse was a formality and she could simply take him, dare me to fight it, and let the dust settle in her favor the way it always had. If that list hadn't existed, if I hadn't done the boring paperwork weeks earlier, the day I removed everyone but me and Daniel, she'd have driven off with my son. I added the incident report to the folder. Date, time, witnesses, the director's signature. It was one more record gathered in daylight through the front door, and it was the one that made it personal in a way no court filing had. She hadn't just tried to win. She'd tried to take him. She was building her record, too. Not in a courtroom. In the town. In the only court my mother had ever actually won in. The court of who looks respectable. I put Theo to bed that night, read him 2 extra chapters because he asked. And after he was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and went through my own folder one more time, page by page, the way I'd prep a case at work for someone else. And that's when the doubt came in. Right when I needed to feel ready, I felt the floor go. Because here's what I knew that no one tells you in the movies. Having the truth is not the same as winning. I'd seen parents walk into family court with everything on their side and still get steamrolled by a confident liar and a sympathetic story. My mother was a sympathetic story. A worried grandmother, church clothes, wet eyes, a folder that said petition, and me, the daughter dragging her own mother to court, the divorced single mom, the family's known cautionary tale. What if the judge looked at her and saw a grandmother who loved a little boy? What if the judge looked at me and saw exactly what they'd spent 34 years telling everyone I was? And now my job was wobbling, and the whole town had a story about me, and my mother had references from a pastor and a doctor and a seat next to the judge's wife on the hospital auxiliary. What did I have? A folder. A folder against a woman who had spent 40 years learning how rooms work and how to be believed in them. I almost called Daniel to back out, to propose some kind of settlement, to offer her supervised visits, scheduled calls, anything if she'd just withdraw the petition and let it die quietly the way she'd let the last one die, to make it stop. I actually picked up the phone to call her lawyer. I had his number from the letter. I sat there with my thumb over it at 1 a.m, ready to fold because folding had always been how I survived her. That was the lowest hour. 2 a.m, certified petition in my hand, certain I was going to lose my son to the people who'd spent my whole life making me feel like I deserved to. I thought, maybe they're right. Maybe a fit mother wouldn't be sitting alone at a kitchen table at 2 a.m. terrified. Maybe the folder is just a sad woman trying to prove she's not what everyone says. The old voice, my mother's voice, the one she'd installed in me before I could spell my own name, told me to give up, that I'd lose, that I deserved to lose. And then I did the thing I do at work when a case feels hopeless. I stopped listening to the story and I looked at the paper. The school says Theo is thriving. The doctor says Theo is healthy. The counselor says I did it exactly right. A nurse, 25 years ago, wrote that the home was the problem and the child was fine. The record didn't care about the pastor's reference. The record didn't care about the auxiliary. The record was just true, and true was the one thing my mother had never once been able to manufacture. Then I went down the hall and stood in Theo's doorway. He sleeps with one arm thrown over his face, exactly the way Daniel did in the one childhood photo I have of him. And I thought about my brother, 16 years old, with a mother trying to put a label on him so no one would believe him. I thought about how no one fought for him, how he had to save himself alone by leaving. I was not going to make Theo save himself. I was the adult. I was the one with the folder. In the morning, while I was making his lunch, Theo asked me the question I'd been dreading. "Mom," he said, swinging his legs under the table, "Grandma said I might come live at her house. Is that true?" I set down the knife. I turned around. I have spent my whole career watching adults lie to children to protect themselves and call it kindness, and I had promised myself I would never do it to him. "No," I said, "you live with me. That's not changing. Grandma wants something she's not allowed to have, and there's a judge whose whole job is to make sure she doesn't get it." "Is that why everyone's mad?" "Yes, but none of it is your fault, and none of it is your job to fix. You just have to be 7. I pressed the note into his lunchbox, the one I write every day. "And eat your sandwich." He thought about it the way 7-year-olds do, all at once, and then done. "Okay," he said. "Can Uncle Dan pick me up? Uncle Dan's going to be with you all afternoon." "Good," Theo said. "He lets me have 2 snacks." He went back to his cereal, the crisis filed away, trusting me completely because I had never once given him a reason not to. That was the thing my mother had never understood in 40 years of measuring safety in pews and pensions. Safety, to a child, is an adult who tells you the truth and shows up. I had been that adult every single day. The record knew it, and now a judge was going to know it too. I dropped him at school. I watched him walk in without looking back, the way a secure kid does. Then I drove home and laid out my navy blazer and went back to the table and stopped feeling and started preparing. Before Friday, I want to say something to you directly. If you've ever had a family member rewrite reality until you started doubting your own memory, if you know what it is to be the difficult one simply for refusing to disappear, I see you. That kind of slow erasing is its own kind of harm. Stay with me, because Friday is coming. Friday came gray and cold. Family court is on the 3rd floor of a building that smells like burnt coffee and floor cleaner. I wore a plain navy blazer. I left Theo with the one person I trusted completely, Daniel, at my apartment, with strict instructions to keep his phone on. My parents arrived in a group. Glenda and Walter in their church clothes. Brooke in a suit, playing lawyer. And beside them, an actual lawyer, a tired-looking man my mother had clearly hired by the hour, carrying her famous folder. I had no lawyer. I couldn't afford one, and I didn't need one for a preliminary hearing on a guardianship petition where I was the fit parent and they had the burden of proof. I had a manila folder and 12 years of watching how this room works. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Ferris, with reading glasses and the patient, unimpressed expression of someone who has heard every story twice. She called the case. My mother's lawyer stood. "Your Honor," he began, "my clients are the maternal grandparents of a 7-year-old boy. They come before this court with grave concerns about his welfare in his mother's care. We're seeking guardianship to protect the child from an unstable home environment." "Specifics," Judge Ferris said, not looking up from her file. The lawyer launched into it. I was emotionally unstable. The home was chaotic. The child was anxious. The father was absent and the mother couldn't cope. My mother dabbed her eyes on cue. Brooke nodded along like a witness in a play. It was a good performance. If I hadn't lived my own life, I might have believed it. "And do you have documentation of these concerns?" the judge asked. "Reports? Findings? Anything from the school, a physician, Child Protective Services?" The lawyer hesitated. "We have my client's sworn statements, Your Honor, and Mrs. Markham's own account of the conditions in the home." "So, family members' opinions," the judge said. Deeply informed opinions, Your Honor. Judge Ferris took off her glasses. Ms. Markham, you're representing yourself? Yes, Your Honor. You've heard the petition. What's your response? I stood. My hands were steady. I'd waited my whole life to be steady in front of these people. Your Honor, I'm Theo's mother. I'm a fit parent and I'd like to respond to the petition with the record, rather than with opinions. May I approach with documents? The judge nodded. The clerk took my folder. I want to tell you exactly how this happened because it didn't happen all at once. It happened in waves, and each wave turned one more person in that room. The petition alleges my home is unstable and my son is at risk, I said. Theo's complete school record is the first set of documents. His attendance is near perfect. Every teacher note describes him as happy, secure, and well-adjusted. After his father left, I brought him to the school counselor myself. The counselor's note, which is in front of you, says I handled the transition, and I'm quoting, exactly right. Judge Ferris read. She nodded once. The second set is his complete medical record. Every well-child visit on schedule. Every vaccination current. His therapist's discharge summary states he made excellent progress in, quote, a stable, supportive home environment. The judge turned a page. My mother's lawyer shifted in his seat. This was the first wave. The facts simply did not match the story. The judge could feel it. The petitioners say they're worried about Theo's safety, I went on. Yesterday afternoon, my mother went to Theo's after-school program and attempted to remove him from the building, using a card my sister had handed out at a school concert, listing herself as his new emergency contact. The staff refused because she is not on the authorized pickup list. The program director documented the incident and signed it. It's in the folder. I'd ask the court to consider who, in this case, has actually tried to take a child without authority. The judge's eyebrows rose. She read the incident report, her mouth set in a flat line. And there's more, I went on. 2 days ago, my mother went to Theo's school and asked the principal to document a concern. The principal is named Ms. Albright. She declined because there was nothing to document. With the court's permission, Ms. Albright is here today and prepared to testify. The judge looked up. She's here? Yes, Your Honor. I'd asked, off the record, in a school hallway, whether she'd come if it came to it. She had taken a personal day and driven downtown. She stood up in the back of the courtroom now. That was the second wave. A neutral professional, a principal with no stake in our family war, standing to say the child was fine. I watched my mother's confidence crack along its first seam. She had not expected the institution she tried to use to show up on my side. Judge Ferris made a note. I may want to hear from her. Continue, Ms. Markham. The petition also presents my parents as people acting solely out of concern for Theo, who would never act against his interest. I took a breath. I'd direct the court to the last document in the folder. It's a certified copy of a court record from this county. I saw my mother's head turn, slowly, toward the folder. 4 years ago, I said, my mother filed a guardianship petition against me, alleging in nearly identical language that I was an unstable and unfit parent and that Theo was unsafe in my care. That petition is the certified document in front of you. Case number and her signature are on the first page. The courtroom went very quiet. She withdrew that petition 6 weeks after filing it, I said. Voluntarily. The record shows it was dismissed at her own request. No finding was ever made that I was unfit because she never let it reach a judge. She filed, and when it became inconvenient, she quit. That's not, my mother started. Mrs. Markham, the judge said without raising her voice. You'll have your turn. There's one more document, Your Honor, I said, and I'll be honest with the court about what it is and why it's here. It isn't about me, and it isn't about Theo. It's a medical record from 1999. My mother's lawyer half rose. Your Honor, the relevance? I'll determine relevance, Judge Ferris said. Go on. In 1999, my mother took my older brother, who was 16, to a hospital emergency room and told the staff he was a danger to himself. He was not. He was a teenager who told her he intended to move out at 18. He was evaluated and discharged in 4 hours. I kept my voice level, the way you read a fact and not a wound. The intake nurse wrote a note. It's the certified copy in front of you. It reads, no evidence of risk. Patient presents as a normal adolescent in a high-conflict home. Recommend family services. My brother kept that note for 25 years to remind himself he wasn't what she said he was. The courtroom had gone the particular kind of silent where you can hear the clock. I'm not asking the court to relitigate 1999, I said. I'm showing the court a pattern. 3 times now, my brother, then me 4 years ago, then me today. When one of her children tried to live a life she didn't control, my mother went to an institution and told them that child or that child's home was unsafe. Each time the institution looked and found nothing. A nurse in 1999, a judge who never got the chance 4 years ago, a school principal 2 days ago, and now this court. This was the 4th wave, the deepest one, and I felt the whole room shift with it. Because a single petition is a frightened grandmother. 2 is a coincidence. But a nurse's note from 1999 saying the exact thing the school counselor's note says now. The child is fine. The home she came from is the problem. That's not a coincidence. That's a method, and everyone in that room heard it land. This was the 3rd wave, and it was the one that broke the surface. Because now the judge wasn't just weighing whether I was a fit parent. She was looking at a woman who had made this exact accusation before, abandoned it, and come back 4 years later to make it again, and who, 2 days ago, had tried to get a school to manufacture evidence for her. Judge Ferris turned to my mother's lawyer. Counsel, were you aware your client had filed a substantially identical petition 4 years ago and withdrawn it? The lawyer's silence was its own answer. He had not known. My mother had not told him. She had handed him a folder of opinions and let him walk into a courtroom blind. Your Honor, the lawyer said carefully, I'd request a moment with my client. In a moment, the judge said. First, I'd like to hear from Mrs. Markham, since she's eager to speak. And here is where my mother did the thing she always does, the thing Daniel warned me about. When she is caught, she does not apologize. She attacks. She stood up, and the church clothes grandmother was gone, and the real one came out. That girl, she said, pointing at me, her voice rising, has been ungrateful her entire life. I raised her. I gave her everything, and she has done nothing but make herself the victim and punish this family for loving her. Yes, I filed before, because she was a mess then, and she's a mess now, and somebody in this family has to think about that child because she certainly can't. Mrs. Markham. And now she wants to stand here and act like the responsible one with her little folder, like she's so much smarter than all of us when she is exactly what I always said she was. Mrs. Markham, that's enough. But it wasn't, because my mother had finally found the audience she'd always wanted, and she couldn't stop. You've left me no choice, she shouted. You always leave me no choice. The daisy cutter, the last time. And this time, screamed in a courtroom. It didn't sound like a reason. It sounded like exactly what it was, a confession. The room was silent. My father stared at the table. Brooke had gone white. The lawyer had his hand over his eyes. And then my father did something he has never done in my life. He spoke without being asked. Glenda, Walter said. Just her name. Quiet. He didn't look at me, and he didn't look at the judge. He looked at his wife of 38 years with an expression I'd never seen on him. Something between exhaustion and shame. Sit down, that's enough. Walter. I said, that's enough. His voice cracked on the last word. I signed that thing 4 years ago because you told me she was going to hurt herself like Daniel. You told me the same thing about Daniel. I'm not... He stopped. His hands were flat on the table. I'm not doing it a 3rd time. The boy is fine. Anybody with eyes can see the boy is fine. It wasn't an apology to me. He never once turned my way. He was a man who had spent his whole marriage believing whatever his wife told him about their children because it was easier than the alternative, and he had just, at 70, run out of road. It didn't undo anything, but it was the 2nd person at that table to stop carrying her story, and I watched my mother realize she was being left alone with it. Brooke was the last seam to go. She'd come dressed like a lawyer, ready to be the responsible one, the good daughter managing the family crisis. Now she sat very still, and I watched her look at the certified petition in the judge's hand, and at our father, and at our mother's face with the mask off it, and I saw something dawn on her that she'd spent her whole life not letting dawn. that the woman who'd told her she was the good one was the same woman who'd been quietly destroying the rest of us all along. That being the favorite had never been love. It had been a role in a story, and the story was a lie. She didn't say anything. She didn't defend our mother, and she didn't defend me. She just put her hand over her mouth and stared at the table, and for the first time in my life, my sister looked like she didn't know who she was. I did not raise my voice. I had been raising it inside my whole life and never once out loud, and I wasn't going to start now. I waited until the silence was complete. I do have a choice, I said quietly. I've always had one, and I've made it. I'm Theo's mother. I'm not going anywhere. If you've ever had to stand in a room and calmly tell the truth about someone who taught you to doubt yourself, if you finally said the thing out loud, I hope you felt what I felt. If this story reached you tonight, tell me about the boundary you set that changed your life. I read every one. Judge Ferris let the quiet sit, then she put her glasses back on. I've heard enough to rule on the petition, she said. The petitioners carry the burden of proving the mother unfit. They've presented no documentation, no professional findings, and no credible evidence of harm. The mother has presented a school record, a medical record, and a counselor's assessment, all of which describe a healthy, well-cared-for child. I find the mother to be a fit and capable parent. She looked over her glasses at my mother. I'll add that I find the prior withdrawn petition relevant. A repeated filing on identical allegations, withdrawn once and renewed years later without any new evidence of harm, suggests a pattern that has more to do with control than with the welfare of this child. The petition for guardianship is denied. She wasn't finished. Mr. and Mrs. Markham. Ms. Markham. She looked at Brooke. I'm going to be direct. This little boy has a fit, attentive, capable mother. What he does not need is the adults in his family weaponizing him against each other. I would caution all of you against any further attempt to interfere with this mother's custody or to involve his school in your disputes. Do you understand me? My father said, Yes, Your Honor. One more matter, I said before the judge could close. The petitioner's attorney sent a letter to my employer this week, accusing me of abusing my position to pursue this. I'd ask the court to note for the record that nothing I presented today came from anything but my own rights as a parent, and a public document any citizen can pull. My employer suspended me over that letter. I'd like the record to reflect there was nothing to it. Judge Ferris looked at the lawyer, then back at me. So noted. For the record, Ms. Markham presented only her child's own records, to which she is entitled, and a certified public filing. There is no basis whatsoever for any allegation of professional misconduct, and the court will say so in writing if her employer requires it. That single sentence on the record was worth more than any speech. I'd watched it work for clients 100 times. Now it worked for me. My mother said nothing. She gathered her famous folder, the one full of opinions, and she held it against her chest exactly the way she had in the school hallway, and she walked out without looking at me. Walter stood slowly, like his knees hurt, and followed her. But Brooke didn't go after them. Brooke caught up to me in the hallway by the elevators. Her mascara had run. For once, she wasn't performing. I didn't know about Daniel, she said. The hospital. I was 19. They told me he ran off. I believed them. She pressed her lips together. I believed everything they told me. About him. About you. I was the good one because I never asked. I know, I said. I didn't soften it for her, and I didn't twist it either. It was a good deal, being the favorite. Right up until you saw the price. Is there anything— She stopped. Can I see him, Theo, sometime? On your terms. I'll never go around you, I swear. I looked at my sister, who had wanted my son the way she wanted a listing, and who was now standing in a courthouse hallway with her whole story in pieces at her feet. Maybe, I said. Someday, when you've spent some time figuring out who you are when you're not her good daughter. Not before. She nodded. It wasn't forgiveness. It was the door not being locked, which was more than she'd given me my whole life. And that was the asymmetry, the thing I want you to remember. They came with shame. I came with records. They came with a folder of what they wanted to be true. I came with a folder of what was. They tried to use the system as a weapon, And the system, for once, just told the truth. It would be a tidy ending to say I felt triumphant. I didn't. I felt the way you feel after you've held your breath for a long time underwater and finally come up. I sat in my car in the parking garage and I texted Daniel one word: denied. He texted back a photo. Theo at my kitchen table, building something out of marshmallows and toothpicks, his tongue between his teeth in concentration. Daniel had written underneath it, "He's safe. You did it. We're okay." I read that "we" 3 times, my brother and me, the 2 cautionary tales. Okay. I drove home. Theo ran to the door. He'd built a marshmallow tower nearly as tall as he was, and he wanted me to see it before it fell. I got down on the floor with him and we looked at it together, and it held for almost a minute before it came down, and we both laughed. My parents have not called. Brooke sent one text weeks later that said only, "I hope you're happy." I didn't answer. Daniel comes for dinner on Sundays now. Theo calls him Uncle Dan, and Daniel pretends not to love it. Here is the thing I finally understand. The wound I carried so long I thought it was just my shape. I spent my whole life believing them when they told me I was the broken one, the one who couldn't cope, the warning. I built my entire self around the fear that they were right. And the deepest cruelty wasn't the folder or the hearing or the words in the school hallway. It was that they almost made me hand them my son to prove a story about me that was never true. I'm not the cautionary tale, I never was. I was the one who stayed standing. My job called the Monday after. My supervisor had gotten the judge's note. The suspension was lifted. The letter from my mother's lawyer was in a drawer somewhere being forgotten, and she said, a little awkwardly, that she was sorry and that she'd never seen anyone walk into family court alone and walk out like that. I told her it wasn't nerve, it was paperwork. She thought I was joking. I wasn't. This morning I made Theo's lunch and I wrote the note the way I do every day. "You're exactly right," it said, because that's what the counselor wrote about the home I built, and I've decided to keep that phrase forever, to take the worst word my family ever used about me, unfit, and bury it under a better one. He'll find it at noon between his sandwich and his apple, and he won't know it's a flag I planted. He'll just know his mother showed up. Again. Like always. Theo's tower fell again last night, and he just built it back. He doesn't know yet what he comes from. Someday I'll tell him. But for now, he knows the only thing that matters. His mother showed up and stayed and would walk through any door, any courtroom, any folder, to keep him. That's the whole inheritance. It isn't a house or a pension or a pew or a name that opens doors in a small town. It's a child who knows all the way down that he is safe, and nobody is ever taking it away.